So I'm Steve Reeder, and this is another filming of Monrovia Moments, filmed by Owen DeWeese, and today we're interviewing Ed Olleman. So Ed, what year did you graduate from Monrovia?
1971.
And give us a brief history of your family.
My mother was a Kenworthy, and Roy Kenworthy owned Kenworthy and Sons hardware store, and as a farm implement store. They sold International Harvester trucks. They sold the buses to the school, and Mooresville School, they sold the international buses to them. Combines, tractors, all International Harvester equipment. These International Harvester dealership, one of the oldest in the state. He had a 50-year award. For being an international harvester. In fact, he was the oldest at the time International Harvester dealership in the state of Indiana. And then he had another award for having 60 years as some kind of a hardware organization that you had to belong to get your stuff at discount for the state of Indiana. And then behind the store on Water Street, where that Cinderstone brick building is that they work on trucks now, but that building was strictly for working on tractors. And they brought tractors from clear out eminence down to Perry. I mean, they had a wrecker, and they'd go out there and pull them in out of the field and put them on the flatboy and drag them back in and work on them there. We had 2 full-time mechanics. I was there 12 months out of the year, and in the summer, when the farmers weren't farming, Max Riggs, Max was a school bus driver. He's a farmer, but if he wasn't driving the bus or farming, he worked in the garage back there working on tractors for my grandfather. And Bud Gold lived on the back street of Prey Street, and Bud was a Volkswagen mechanic. He also was a mechanic up at the Indianapolis 500. And if they got covered up, they would ask Bud, and he'd come in and work in the garage also and help out. So it was a very, very busy place, very mainstream for the area. Everybody knew about if your tractor broke down, if it was an International Harvester, you had to take it to Monrovia and have Kenworthy and Sons work on it. So I think that store was built in 1916, after the fire. The fire was in 1916. And I don't think Harlem owned that block of the town until it burnt down. He must have bought it afterwards. And so for people who knew back then, there's the bank building on the corner, and then there's Turley's. And then next to that is a music store now, but it says Roy Kenworthy on the front of it, 1954?
55. Yeah.
55, and my grandfather built that, and he got a contract with the United States Postal Service, and he told him he'd build a building, and they had to sign a 30-year lease agreement. So for 30 years, that building was the post office for the town of Monrovia, and Roy Kenworthy built that. And then the building next to it says this says Kenworthy, but his father built that store. And then next to that was the old gym, old community building. And then where the dentist office and the Subway is now, my grandfather owned those buildings, and the dentist office is just a warehouse. And the Subway was a blacksmith shop, and Roy owned that, and Donis Miller was a blacksmith there in town for as long as I could remember. And he was Linda Kaiser's grandfather.
Right.
And they lived in Mooresville. Him and Minnie lived in Mooresville. And he drove all the way to Mooresville to run that blacksmith shop every day. And he was darn good, because I went to work there when I was 14 years old. And I do silly stuff, pulling wheel stands of tractor, riding lawnmower, and break a axle or something and limp it around there, and he'd weld it up and sand it down, paint it so my grandpa and my daddy wouldn't know I tore it up. And broke a frame on a go-kart one time. He fixed it for me so they wouldn't know I broke the frame on it. I mean, he was a good old guy. He
got you out of a lot of trouble.
He bailed me out of trouble.
Now, didn't Roy live at the end of the street?
Yes, yes. Two houses there on the left-hand side, right there at Baltimore Road. It's got a really Spanish architect. It's got arches and stucco finish, and that was Maud and Roy's house. That was her second house. The first house burnt down.
Okay.
And Maud wanted something really different. I don't know where she got the architect from to design that, but there's nothing around here that even come close to the style that it had back then.
And next to them was the Hubbards, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Hubbards owned Hubbard's Mill.
Right.
So yeah, the two, probably back after coming out of the Depression and stuff, the two richest families in Monrovia lived right there next to each other.
Yeah.
Now, I never heard Jim or my grandfather ever argue or say a bad thing about each other, but I tell you, Maud and Bertha Hubbard would go at it from time to time.
That happens with neighbors.
Yeah, it does.
So Roy Kenworthy, so Harlan had it, and then Roy had the shop there. 6-year award for hardware, 50-year award for International Harvester.
Correct.
And your family was also involved with Mayflower Trucking in some capacity.
Okay, Roy had a brother named Don, and Harlan offered. He said, "I don't think there's enough money here for both of you to make a living at. So one of you can take the store, and the other one I'll give them the equal amount of value, and you're on your own." Well, Harlan had idea of starting a trucking company, and he said, well, "I'll take the money. Roy, you can have the store." And so Roy said, "Okay." So he stayed in Monrovia and kept the store, and Don went on to form a Mayflower Trucking Company. Him and another fellow named Gentry, I can't remember that fellow's name, but the two of them started the Mayflower Trucking Company. So that's how that came about.
And then the hardware store also had a pretty important role during World War II, and what was that?
It's where, when the war broke out, the military came and set up a booth in the front there, and if you wanted to sign up to join the Army, they signed up right there in front of the store because it was a well-known place in the community. So people from all over Hall, Wilbur, Eminence, clear up to Clayton, came down to Kenworthy's to sign up to join the Army for the war. Also, there's no doctors in Monrovia, and there's a doctor from Danville. I can't think of his name, but he'd come down, I don't even think on a weekly basis. I think it was like every other week. Well, people in the community were sick, they would call in, and Roy's secretary, Mabel, would write down their names and phone number and address and what was wrong with them. And the doctor came to them to get the list of people that he was supposed to, that's when the doctors made house calls.
Okay.
And so he'd either be there a little while and people would come in, but the ones that were so sick they couldn't come into the store for him to see them, he would go visit the house.
So the store was kind of a quasi doctor's office for a while.
Yes, yeah.
Now, how did they get the farm?
Twice a month.
How did they get the farm equipment into downtown Monrovia? That seems like that would have been really hard. You said they had flat trailers and things like that.
Yeah.
But it seems like that would just been a pretty impressive thing to see that farm equipment coming down Main Street the way it was.
More than likely it came down Alpha 40 because 40
Right.
is a national highway.
Right.
So
Okay.
that means they had to drag it down 39
Right.
and worm our way through there to the dock, the backside of that blue bank building. And it's hard to tell it now, but the corner is as an angle. And the guys could back off the street and back up to that brick wall there, and then they would unload their equipment there behind the bank. And that's how they got the equipment on and off the trucks, was right there behind that bank building.
So Roy Kenworthy, besides having the International Harvester and the hardware store, you had already mentioned was instrumental in getting the post office to Monrovia, but also the bank was there in 21, and then of course during the Great Depression it had failed. But didn't Roy Kenworthy have a lot to do with Citizens Bank coming in?
He did. He was on the board of directors of Citizens Bank, and convinced him to come back to Monrovia and open up a branch.
It was like in the mid-50s or so when that occurred, I think.
Gosh, I really don't know. I know it was after the Depression, after the 30s.
Yeah. Okay.
It might have been in the 40s, but definitely by the 50s.
Okay.
They were there. And Hubbard's mill had a couple of big grain bins, but Roy built some other grain bins because the crops are good, and when things were good, Hubbard's couldn't handle all the grain that was coming in at that time. Nowadays, and so Roy built, I think there's 6 bins, smaller bins, so each farmer would know his corn was in this corn bin, where Hubbard's had these great big huge ones that they dump maybe 3 or 4 or 5 farmers, they just dump all the grain together. But Roy, each farmer knew my grain's in that bin, that's my grain, you know. And so he kind of helped out Hubbard's there on storing the grain until they could haul it off the market, because trucks weren't as big back then. It took longer to haul things in. But in probably the 50s, definitely by the 60s, well, you had Dorsett's out there to haul, and he built those big granaries out there. And Knowles out west on 40 built a couple, 2 or 3 grain bins on their property, and Ray's built some on theirs. So those bins weren't getting used, and he sold them all for metal, I believe. And then he turned around and sold the property to Mickey Siegler, and Mickey Siegler put a body shop in the back side of it.
Right.
And then after Mick died, his wife sold it, and that's where the Dollar General store is at now. And that lot behind it, Roy owned all that, and that's where those grain bins used to sit.
Now, you and I had talked about the, you remember the tomato pickers.
Oh, yeah. So you go out to Morovia and you turn the first street to your right's Everett Road.
Yeah.
And you go down and the road curves to your left. Well, Brays lived in that big house. And then it zigzags, it goes on, and then there's a long straightaway, and there's another house where, and there's one of those Everetts that live in that house now, but the Bray lived there too. And they had a boy that was my age. And after church, I'd usually, in the summertime, we'd stay all night at each other's house. And when the pickers were in, we like to go up there and hang out and walk around the lot and listen to them talk and stuff. And they were just little one-room huts, and they just had like there wasn't any running water. Running water was a spigot out there. They'd go out there and get their own water. Most of them cooked on open fires or like a grill or something outside. Yeah, it was pretty destitute. They were pretty downbeaten bunch of people, but they would stay for really not that long, a month or so, maybe, and they'd be gone, you know. But every year they came in. And
how many do you think that there were, probably?
Oh gosh, maybe 50.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And then when I got older, they'd come into town once a week on payday, and they'd load up in the back of a couple of pickup trucks, and they'd drive them into town. And my grandfather had me come in, and Dad and Roy and Mabel Shield is his secretary, and they'd put me in front of the store and to watch them, because they were scared that they would steal something.
Right.
And those poor people wouldn't steal nothing. They scared to death. But now it makes me feel kind of bad the way we was intimidating them, you know. And I mean, they just have about half scared to pick something up and look at it, you know, afraid he's going to get in trouble. One guy spoke English, and nobody else spoke no English at all, no comprende, you know. And but some of them I'd seen, and they'd seen me, and we'd smile at each other, and I'd go up and talk to them, and I'd help them look at stuff if they wanted to. And my grandfather thought that was neat, because I don't know, act like they were scared to associate with them, but just from hanging out with Tim and going over there and talk, you know, watching them and stuff, I didn't have any trouble not trying to talk to them, trying to help them, trying to help them, you know. Now, and the same thing, they'd go across the street to Dowden's Market, and they'd all be out there, you know, walking the floor, watching them, and they, you know, they're just scared to death. He's going, I really don't think so. I think the people are so scared they wouldn't begin to steal anything. You know, just afraid to get their hands cut off or something.
Now, you attended the elementary that is currently the middle school.
Right.
And were you some of the first students that went through here?
Correct. And I was in the kindergarten class.
Right. Yes, I forgot that.
The community building, which was a gym, and there's 2 offices, one on each side, and one side was a kindergarten class, and the other side my dad started an insurance office in. And I really don't know if they kept doing kindergarten after my class went through there or not. And so I was in that very first grade class when they opened up, must be the front building here.
Right.
And then I was lucky enough to get to go to the old school my junior or 7th and 8th grade year. And that was a trip. One day the teacher got mad and went over and hit the board, slammed his fist on the blackboard, and it came off the wall and fell through his crack and landed in the classroom below him. And there's no air conditioning. I mean, they'd open windows and we'd be throwing paper wads out at the window and stuff at other people, and it was just a really fun experience. The floor, sometimes the cracks, you could look down in the classroom below you through the cracks in the floor.
So it was a really good thing that they didn't use that building too
yes,
much longer.
it most definitely is. Most definitely is.
Now, when you were elementary here, at one point you had Virginia Jet.
Correct.
What was that like?
There was definitely favorite teachers, you know, and Catherine Whiteman was a very, very powerhouse person. She was my 2nd grade teacher. Ruth Curtis, my 1st grade teacher, was a very nice, well-liked. Whiteman didn't take no guff off of nobody. She would, I seen her pick kids up upside down and whip them out there in recess, instead of taking them to the principal's office. And Virginia Jet, you didn't mess around. Well, Catherine Whiteman and Virginia Jet were probably the 2 most feared teachers in the grade school. Paul Schuler's wife was a 3rd grade teacher, and she was a big woman. They must have had German blood in them, but she looked scary, but she was actually a really tender, kind woman, you know. And Mrs. Jett was a very good teacher.
Right.
She was a good teacher. I don't knock at that. I'm just saying you didn't cross her path. She told you to jump, and you said how high.
Yeah.
And, you know, back then, everybody had a ping pong paddle.
Yeah.
They'd bring you in and make you sit over her lap and smack your butt right there in front of the whole class. That hurt more than the paddling. You know,
yeah.
Humiliating, you know.
So you were in the old building for junior high, and then you were in the current high school, which at the time was pretty new.
Oh, it was brand new.
And
I was a freshman when we went into that building.
And of course, one person that everybody wants to hear about was Paul Schuler. So what was he like as a teacher?
He wouldn't even open the book.
Yeah.
He'd walk in and say, "Where were we? What was he talking about? Where were we at?" And so he'd just sit on the edge of his desk and talk and say, and tell you to read what we went over in class that day, and then what he told you was more interesting what they had printed in the books, because he'd tell you stuff that wasn't in the books, you know, like the way we treated the American Indians. Back then, they sugarcoated that stuff in our history books. He told you the truth, you know. Yeah. And you know how vicious the Romans were to the Christians and stuff. I mean, he's a history teacher, and he made instead of just sitting there reading it out of a book. I mean, he'd tell you stories and tell you things that made it interesting. I wanted to be a history teacher at one time. It was probably because of Paul Schuler.
Now, who was your principal when you went to high school here?
Mr. Fisher.
So what was it like having Billy McFisher as your principal?
He was my principal at the old school too. My 7th and 8th grade year at the old building, and then he was principal when we very first built this one. I forget where he went after he left here. But Billy Mack knew my parents, my grandparents, and knew my family really well. I think in junior high I was like treasurer one year and sergeant at arms, but my freshman year I finally got elected class president. And I thought, yeah, you know, cool, you know, I'm class president. And I can't remember if it was the same day or the day after we had our elections. He said, "Come into my office, I want to talk to you." And I thought, oh no, what to do? So I went and sat down. He says, he was like, "Congratulations, I hear you got voted president." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I want you to give that up." I'm going, what? He said, I got a better deal for you. And I said, you got a better deal for me than class president? And he said, yeah. And at that time, this is 60s, it's been 68, yeah, 68. You started to have the riots going on on the college campuses.
Right.
And protest marches for the Vietnam War, and the school decided to form a student council. So the council was kind of like a negotiating committee with the faculty, between the students and the faculty, and to kind of keep the faculty aware of what the students are thinking and what was going on. And he told me it's a political thing. He said, you really need to be in on this. And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, I know you don't. He said, congratulations. He said, but this is political. This is something you need to be in on. He said, I want you in there. He said, you know everybody. He said, you're in marching band, you know the band geeks, you play sports, you know the jocks. He said, you get along with all the farm boys. Because you're grandpa's store, he said, you're just a perfect guy to be on there. He said, you represent a wide range of people, you know. And he said, so you're just the kind of person we need. So I said, okay. And they had a re-election and reappointed me to somebody in my position, and I was on the student council. And just my luck, very first year, the students decided to have a protest because we moved into the new building and we had a new dress code. And you had to have your shirts tucked in, and girls couldn't wear, they could wear on winter days pants in underneath their skirts, but when they got to school they had to take their pants off. And you couldn't wear, the girls couldn't wear open-toe shoes. There's a couple of things. So we went in, complained about it. Well, actually, the bell rang to go back to class at lunchtime, and everybody just stayed out the gym. They didn't go back to class. And I go, what's going on? They go, oh, we're having a protest, you know? And I go, we are? They go, yeah. Oh, okay. So I'm standing out there. Well, Billy Mack walks out there and grabs me. In my office now. I go, why? I had nothing to do. He goes, you're on student council. You're representing these people all with your body in my office. And he got a couple other council people, and he rounded us up. And he said, what in the hell's going on, you know? And he said, well, go out there and tell them, go back to the room, write down a list of demands, and we'll have a meeting tomorrow about it. And so I was just a freshman. I don't know who was probably the senior. And so we had to go back to the gym, try to get everybody's attention, saying, hey, you know, we're going to listen to our demands. We need to write the list of what we really want, get serious about this, and everybody go back to class. And that's the only event we had all year long, but I just couldn't believe it. You know, here I got appointed this position, and just like within 30 days, boom, here, you know, we had to, but I think we got to where we could wear your t-shirt. You didn't have to tuck your shirts in. And, oh, I know, you couldn't even wear t-shirts. They wanted you to wear button-down shirts. So we could wear a t-shirt, but you still had to tuck it in. But the cool thing was we could wear a shirt, an overshirt over a shirt, and leave it unbuttoned and leave it untucked. And that became the raging style. You know, everybody was walking around with a t-shirt on with their shirt tails hanging out and their button-down shirt on the outside of their pants. And the girls got to keep their pants, their blue jeans on, or in the winter, if it was below 32 degrees, they could wear their pants to school and keep them on, didn't have to take them off when they got to school. Everybody's happy. You know, everybody got a little bit of something. He gave us just enough to make everybody happy, and that was the end of it.
So do you think Monrovia had fewer problems because of the council?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I believe it definitely was a good thing. There was other things after 4 years that rose up, something to do with the prom and post-prom. And yeah, I think it definitely was a good thing.
Now, when you were in high school, did the seniors still do corduroy pants?
My sister's 3 years older than me, and they done cords.
Because I know there was a certain year.
I think the class of 69 done some, but I don't remember anybody in the class of 70 doing them. And there was very few in the class of 69.
Okay, so it became something that started to go away, basically.
Yeah,
okay.
It did. I don't remember a single person in my class having them. And I can't remember anybody, but 69, I remember some of the kids in the class of '69 done it, and that's about the end of it.
Now, you had mentioned that you were in a wide variety of things. So, what was band like when you were in high school here?
We would march in the Martinsville Parade, which our band doesn't do anymore.
Yeah.
I think we marched in the Old Settlers Parade at Mooresville. Band days at State Fair.
State Fair.
We'd done that, and our band doesn't do that anymore. And then once a year, we'd go down to IU to band day at a football game. And that was the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. They literally lined up like 20 schools on each side of the field and blew a whistle, and you had to charge onto the field, and then you were supposed to stop. You played like one or two songs, and then you had to run back off the field, and that was it. And then you went to the bus and put your stuff up, and you could go watch the game. Told you if you dropped your mouthpiece or your music, don't stop, you'd get trampled to death. I mean, it was pretty scary. It was thousands, there's a bunch of people that were charging on that football field. It was pretty scary.
You guys performed at the basketball games, right?
Oh yeah, all the halftime shows. Oh, that was fabulous. Me and Gary Morris, Stanley Hayduke were on the ball team, and we didn't have enough time to run upstairs and put on our band uniforms. So we ran up and grabbed our instruments and ran back down and marched on the court in our basketball uniforms. And then had to go put them up, and then usually we missed a coach yelling at the kids in the locker room. So
kind of worked out.
Yeah, by the time we got back down there, they was already on the floor, and we just walked out there and started shooting the ball and warming up again,
The one thing that a couple of people have talked about was they felt like when they were in school in Monrovia that the coaches really worked together. It's like you were a basketball player, but still were allowed to march at halftime. Mm-hmm. And Dean Hadley said the same thing about marching band and football. Everybody kind of worked together. You had told me another story about your basketball career. You're the first person to have done what in our gym?
Oh yeah, that was, and Trinkle, Coach Trinkle was my 7th grade coach, and then I had another coach for 8th grade. And in my freshman year, I didn't make I was on the junior varsity team, and I saw him in the bank about 10 years ago, and he walked up to me and said, "Ed," I called him Coach. I always called him Coach all my life. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you know who tipped off the very first basketball game played on Branch McCracken floor?" And I said, "No, never thought about it." He goes, "It was you." I go, "It was me?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, "You was the center on the junior varsity team." And he said, "The junior varsity plays before the varsity plays." He goes, "You tipped off the very first ball game ever played on that floor." And he goes, "I want you to think about that." He said, "That's a pretty cool piece of history. Yeah. You might want to tuck away in your hat there, And so I did. I didn't even know I'd done it. Didn't even think about it. It didn't cross my mind, but it is Dave Trinkle, that was his name. It did his, and he goes, "I've been aiming to tell you that I thought about it a couple of years ago, and I thought if I ever see Ed Olleman, I got to tell him you are the one who tipped off the first game ever played on that floor." And I thought, well, okay, that's pretty cool. And I was on the first student council, and then here 40 years later, I was elected to the very first town board of the town of Monrovia.
Monrovia, yeah.
But Mr. Fisher, Bill Fisher, is right, because he told me this is a political thing. He said, "I want you in on this. It'll be a learning experience." So maybe being on that council helped give me the confidence to talk. At work, I became a union steward, and then I became a contract negotiator between Coca-Cola and Teamsters Local 135. And I'm sure all that had to go back to being on that
sorting out dress code
council.
In the 60s.
Yeah, right. And my grandfather told me take a speech class, and I thought, why in the world would I take a speech class? And he said, let's just do it. You'll never regret it. So I think they're only like a half semester class. So I took a speech class, and I don't think I'm a very good speaker, but my union rep told me I put people at ease when I talked to him, and he always liked to have me on the negotiating committee. He said I was didn't offend the company when we were negotiating and could present things without trying to make people mad about it, you know. So I negotiated every contract between 1981 and 2019. And 30 days before I retired, I wrapped up the very last contract. So I thought that's pretty cool. Oh, he's going to talk about the kids going uptown for the lunch.
Yes.
That was in, I don't think the grade school kids could do that. We had a cafeteria in the grade school. In the old school, there was no cafeteria. So you had to walk down here and eat in the cafeteria, or you walked uptown, and Pauline McLeod and Dowden's back at their deli counter was making bologna sandwiches. And like the bologna sandwich was a quarter. If you wanted a slice of cheese, it was 30 cents, you know, and then you had your mustard or whatever you want on it, and they would stand there slinging these sandwiches. And you'd buy you a pop, get you a little bag of chips, and kids would either sit right there at the store. I usually go over to my grandpa's store and sit on a riding lawnmower and stuff in the front of the store and eat with some of my friends. But a lot of kids stood right inside and if the weather was nice, the other kids would go outside and stand outside and eat. But about once a week there'd be a fight. And you just knew there was going, you know, everybody knew about it. Oh, at lunchtime there's going to be a fight, you know. So if you did that, you hurry up and ate your sandwich and went back down, because they usually did it right at the corner, about where the festival building's at. Was a fighting ground. That's where the official boxing around. But nobody got hurt. I mean, they'd push each other and yell at each other and maybe shove one down, or one might actually hit the other one. Mostly there's a lot of hollering going on and pushing and threatening, and you know, nobody shot anybody. Nobody stabbed anybody. We didn't haul off in the ambulance, you know. It was just good old fun, you know. It's the way things were back then. You got out of your system, shook it off, went on about your business, you know.
Now, you had mentioned in the front of the old gym, your dad had insurance, correct?
Correct.
Now, didn't he eventually move down to the corner, kind of where Dairyland's at now?
Correct.
And then there was a car lot there too, as well?
Right, after he started the insurance office. At one time, he was a sales rep for Kenworthy's for the tractors and the buses and stuff. And then he has the insurance office right next to it on one side, and then the post office. He was a substitute mail route driver. So he was a hard worker. He's a hard-working man. He's either out there slinging mail or selling insurance or selling tractors. I mean, he was a busy guy. But when they found out the harvester was going under, and then he started dedicating more time to his insurance. And he moved down there where the Dairyland's at.
Well, about what year did he move to the corner there?
It had been early 70s.
And then the Petro Pantry came in like in 78 or something, I think.
Right.
And then Dairyland in early 80s. Now, you've been really involved in community service. And so you're a member of the Lodge and then the Lions Club. So if you want to speak about any of that, like what you guys do or how long you've been on.
My grandfather told me when he was pretty much on his deathbed that he said, I know you're footloose and fancy free, but whenever you settle down and get yourself together, I want you to join the Masonic Lodge. And I said, okay. And he said, don't do it now because it wouldn't mean nothing to you. He knew how it was. And when I first graduated, I moved up to Speedway. I lived in Speedway for 5 years. I got married, had my first child, talked to neighbors about what's happening to their kids, you know, getting robbed of their lunch money and stuff. And I thought, yeah, I'm not raising a kid in this environment. So I moved back out to Morovia. Best move I ever made. Been here ever since. So after I got back in town, and you know, I've been married 5 or 6 years, and I thought, well, I guess I was, you know, time, and I think I was 30 years old, and I petitioned and joined the Masonic Lodge, and I worked my way through all the way up to the Worship Master's chair, and I was a trustee after that. And then the treasurer died, Seasting, And they appointed me treasurer, and I was treasurer for 12 years. And then I got into politics. I ran for, decided to incorporate the town. And I didn't want to conflict with each other. I didn't want people saying I was doing favors because I was a Mason for people. And so I quit my position in the Masonic Lodge after I got elected to the town board. And gosh, I don't know how many years I've done 3 or 4 terms. I think 3 terms on the town board and 2 terms as president of the town board. And then my wife told me enough. She said, somebody else's turn, take a break. And I did. Me and Bob Marley and Martha Gannon started the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals, and somebody on the town board had to be on the Planning Commission, and that happened to be me because I was the youngest one of the bunch, I guess, I don't know. So I did spend a few years on the Planning Commission, but I gave all it up for a couple of years, and then Martha called, and she was president, and she said, we need you. You got too much knowledge of what's going on, what's happened, and what's happening, and what's supposed to be going on with the commission, and we need you, I want you to come back. And I said, well, ask my wife. And she did. She asked her at church that day, and Diane said, okay. She goes, they only meet once a month, Diane. And on the town council, there's 5 people to take the blame. On the planning commission, there's 9 people. And she said, so it's not going to, it's not the pressure that there is on the town council. She said, it's not, nothing like that was. So she agreed to let me get back on the planning commission. Then somehow I ended up on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Somebody moved away, and I was supposed to take their position until they appointed somebody to that position, and they never appointed anybody in that position. So I've been on the BZA for several terms now, and now somehow I end up being I'm the chairman of the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I'd never intended to do, but it happened. And the people at the church, after they found out I was retiring and going to give up my union job, now that I'm chairman of the administrative board of the United Moravian Methodist Church, which automatically puts me on the finance committee, because they figured since I wasn't doing union work anymore, I had all this free time on my hands and I could help the church out. So I'm busy. I retired in July, and I am
still going.
Still going.
Who were the first 5 members of the Monrovia Town Council?
Martha Gannon, Bob Wooden, Terry Kenworthy, Bob Marley, and me.
And you, okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the Lions Club? What are they, how long have you been involved with the Lions Club, and what are they doing?
Oh my, okay, there's another mess I'm into this year. My wife's president, so anything they're doing, I didn't join. She was a charter member.
Okay.
And I said, I got enough going on, I'm not gonna join. But I'd help set up for the fish fry, I'd help set up for the flower sale, I'd help do this. And Dick Held finally came up to me one day and he said, you might as well join. You do more work than half the people's members of the Lions Club. I said, well, okay. I said, but I won't take an office. Don't ask me to take I won't accept any responsibility, but I'll join and help out. So twice now they've tried to pressure me, and I said, I'll get up and walk out this door. I said, I'm told you guys I'll help you out, but I've got enough on my plate. I got to learn to say no when I'm telling you no. That's all there is to it. But the Lions Club it's fun because, like with Masonic Lodge, it's just men, and with the Lions Club, it's women and couples mostly. So you get to do something with your wife and be with other couples, and people are from different religions. I mean, there's Baptist and Christian church people and Methodist church people, and and Nazarene. There's people who don't even go to church, so you kind of don't have to worry about the religion thing is out of it, And basically, it's just we do the eye screening for the school. We test all the grade school, and I think we do the 8th grade here.
So yeah.
Which is a good service, free eye screening for the kids at the school.
Mention how that started. I wasn't aware of this till I went to the Lions Club. But how did the Lions Club get involved with vision? It was Helen Keller, right?
Helen Keller. these two gentlemen that started it was up in Chicago, and it's just basically they were trying to help destitute people in the community and even organizations. They were just mostly businessmen, kind of like a Rotary Club, I guess, and throwing their money together, and where they saw a need, they was trying to help out. Well, she came to it and said, I got a need, you know, and we need help. And you guys give money to these people, money to these people. How about give me some of that, you know, my organization some of this money? And they were so impressed with her that they made her their banner contributor, you know.
Right.
Basically, so they, the leader dog thing, the Lions Club flips the bill and all that.
Yeah.
They run the school, they buy the dogs, they train the dogs, they bring the people in, they fly them up to Detroit or Flint. The kids stay on campus, not kids, I mean older adults do it too, and for 2 weeks I think, and then they figure out if the dog's compatible with the person or not and turn them loose. But I mean, they're feeding them people or providing them transportation. That is a big expensive undertaking, that leader dog program they got. We have helped students here at Morovia, so we go through an eye test everybody, and then we make the teachers aware. So they tell their parents, and not all the time. Well, that many kids, it's not unusual to have maybe 3 or 4 families saying, we just can't afford that right now. And then we'll pick up the bill. We'll pay for them to go to an optometrist and get an eye screening. I tell you what's happened is we told them we'd buy the glasses, and we've had optometrists refuse the money.
Really?
So that's the amazing thing about the Lions Club. So, the business people in town, what do we need, what do we want? I mean, they've been over backwards to help us, but it's just hard to get people to join. They don't want to have the responsibility of running the organization or being obligated to the duty of doing all the things we do, you know. We're fish fry, and we was helping out at Greendale's. We was selling food out at Greendale's during their fall festival. They quit that this year, so we went over to Anderson Orchard, and they're letting us park cars there one day. And so we've helped one person from the community who had cataracts, needed cataract surgery, couldn't afford it. Said they'd lost their job and they couldn't drive, and so we paid for a cataract surgery.
And also, you've as of late, you're not only funding the original chartered idea of the help for the vision, but you're doing scholarships for students as well. I mean, so the Lions Club is very, very active.
Yeah, we handed out 3 last year. There's just so many darn good kids at Morovia, Morovia High School. Academic, I mean, it's just so hard to pick this kid's better than these kids, you know. And so we got to where we was like starting to give it to 2, and finally we said, well, we had a good year. We had a good year, and they said, well, we got this extra money, let's go ahead and give a 3rd one away. And I don't know if we'll be able to do that this year. No, we had a good year this year. I have to wait and see. We ain't voted on that yet, but I know we're going to give away at least a couple, but hopefully we can give away 3 of them again this year.
Well, the final question we'll have here is, you've been a longtime member of the Methodist Church. So give just a brief history of where the Methodist Church was originally and where it's at now and how long, and some of the members, like Almost Mock. I still don't know where the original old building. There's been 3 different buildings, and they try to say that the old building was on the same site that the second building was at, which is where the liquor store is at. Right.
And then I've had other people tell me, no, that's not true. And so I don't know, because that was back in the 1800s, you know. So
I think the Methodists got to Monrovia around 1840 originally.
Right.
And then 1850 maybe was when the building downtown was built, maybe. But there is, you're right, there are several buildings. We're not exactly sure where the first one was at.
So I know where the second one was at, because I went to that church. And then the Christian church built a new one. And their church was larger than ours, so we bought their church building off of them.
And that building was, the brick building there was built, what, 1919?
Yes,
and
exactly.
then the Christian church now on Gordon Road was built in 1977. So the Methodist church, which was downtown, you guys went from there to the Christian church in 1977.
Correct.
When they went down to Gordon Road.
Exactly.
Okay, and then you took me in that church, and it was just beautifully done. And Virginia Jett's a Monrovia Alumni Hall of Fame member, and so is Elma Smock. So speak a little bit about her.
Elma, I say locally, is probably one of the most renowned painters. You see her work everywhere, and she lived out on Baltimore Road. Was a quiet woman, wasn't a whole lot talkative. Never was really in charge of anything, but she's always there to help out, you know. And she's just a very kind-hearted person. She helped out a lot of people in her lifetime. When she passed away, she gave money to the Methodist Church, and said it's a pretty nice sum, but she said it has to be used to fix up our kitchen in the basement of the church. She wanted it to where people could go down and eat and have a fellowship hall in the basement. And we was able, I mean, she left enough money, was able to put one of those rail rider chairs that haul people in wheelchairs down into the basement. And we can rip the kitchen completely out, and new appliances, new counters, new cabinets, new floor, new ceilings, completely redone, new sinks, completely rebuilt that kitchen. And then was able to indoor, outdoor carpeting, and drop down the roof to this soundproofing ceiling thing. And I'd even put a restroom in down there that we didn't have. So we spent it all, but that was her wishes, and that's what we did with it. But she was the Monrovia Festival, the arts thing, is dedicated to Elma Smock. She's just a great person. Virginia Jett, oh my. She's very active in the Monrovia alumni.
Yeah, very active.
There's some kind of a home economics or something that Ruth Watson was on it.
Homemakers.
Yeah, my mom was on it, and Marilyn Sheila. There was a bunch of people and they were not all of the same church. It was like a local organization, and she was very active in that also. And the food pantry up at the IGA up at Frauberg's, Virginia started that program. And so every Wednesday, the food is distributed to each different church, each different food pantry in the community. But Mrs. McCollum Sylvia was very active in that, and her and Virginia started that and got it up and going, and talked John Falkenberg into doing it. And now my wife took that over. Mr. Jett passed away, and Sylvia's not able to keep up with it anymore, and she asked Diane if she'd take it over, so she's in charge of that now. But she's just always very historically minded. It's just so much fun to talk to her.
You're right, yeah.
I mean, she knew a little bit about everything, you know.
Yeah.
And
just a real treasure for the community.
Yes, she was, and she hardly ever badmouthed anybody. I mean, she'd tell you like it was, but she didn't dog on people, you know.
Right, yeah.
She was really good person, good, fair person.
Well, that was our final question. We'd like
it?
to thank Ed for the Monrovia Moments today.
Thank you.